Kicking off the list at number 10, secret app. At one point or another, we all got the secret vault app on our phones. You know, the one that's designed to look like another app, like a calculator or something like that. It's in case anybody goes through your phone. You can hide your memes or MSN passwords or nudies, whatever you want, all in this app. It just says vault on it too. You're like, okay, well, this is obviously the one. But how secure is that app to begin with? Who's making that? Who's on the other end? Back in June in Australia, hundreds of criminals were arrested after a 3-year operation was complete. The FBI have been trying to crack this case for a while now, obviously 3 years. These cell phones that come from the black market basically have this calculator app that is secretly a platform for criminals to message each other safely. You up? Heist? Question mark? Rose emoji. Shipments, trafficking weapons, contracts, just horrible stuff with horrible people, but the FBI was able to intercept over 20 million messages in over 45 different languages. That's a lot. Operation Trojan Shield. Yeah, you might want to go delete those old pics in that free vault app you got 10 years ago. Yeah, you never know. Go take a look. You might still have it. Right next to Jellycar. Delete both. Number 9, Governor Rod Blagojevich. Back in October 2008, an FBI investigation towards Governor Rod Blagojevich had began. It all began when one of the governor's associates tipped off the FBI that Rod was promising official favors in exchange of campaign or personal funds. Yeah, that's a no-go in the world of an Illinois governor. You can't do that. So the FBI tapped his office and started recording his phone calls. They recorded him for 7 weeks, and after that point, they had more than enough evidence to arrest him come December 2008. Of course, he was also impeached. Recordings didn't sound great as well. There was lots of profanity, lots of talk about this new job as governor and all these bribes that he could now maintain in the future. Rod Blagojevich was convicted of 18 counts of felony corruption by time 2011 rolled around, including soliciting bribes, attempted extortion, wire fraud, just a plethora of horrible stuff. He was sentenced to 14 years in federal prison, and on top of that, he had to pay fines of up to $21,000. Number 8, Nixon's wiretaps. It wouldn't be shocking if you've heard of the Nixon-Watergate hotel scandal. It's pretty massive, history-wise, but if you forget, the Watergate scandal was what led to Nixon resigning in 1974. Back in June 1972, numerous burglars were caught attempting to break into the offices of the Democratic National Committee at the Watergate Hotel in Washington. They were breaking in with the intent to plant bugs. Little mice, not bugs. Although that would be horrible too. There's a bunch of bugs around. Like, where are all these ants come from? Several people involved were connected to Nixon's re-election committee. Nixon denied as best as he could, obviously, reminding us that he's not a crook, famous not a crook line, although we had over 3,500 hours of secretly recorded conversation. Now, there's one 18-minute gap in these tapes. That's what's so compelling still to this day. Maybe he was farting that entire time. You never know. Number 7, Mayor Marion Barry. When the FBI secretly records you, be it video, audio, whatever the case, you're gonna be pretty upset when you eventually find out. No, I would assume I'd be upset. Nixon had all of our phone calls saved. I'd be like, why? What? I was ranting. It's personal. This is private. Back in 1990, the late Marion Barry, who was once mayor of Washington, was being recorded by the FBI and DC police while he was in his hotel room, taking part in some illegal narcotics and such with a friend. Barry went to prison after this was all a big setup, but that still didn't stop him from becoming mayor again once he was released. So you can go to jail, do all this stuff, and bad things happen, get set up by your friend, and then come back and still be a mayor. R.I.P. Number 6, Lance Armstrong's phone calls. Not to be confused with Neil Armstrong, although this next one is truly out of this world. I had to. Lance won the Tour de France 7 times from 1999 to 2005. Impressive, 1000%. I can't even imagine. My legs get tired walking up a hill, let alone cycling this fast and far. Oh my god. It's more than likely you've heard about some happenings with Lance, some scandals and such. In July 2004, Greg LeMond, also a Tour de France winner, he secretly recorded himself having a conversation with Stephanie McIlvaine. Stephanie overheard a conversation previously where Lance was in the hospital being treated for testicular cancer. She admitted on the phone that this is what she heard. Lance admitted to using steroids to a doctor that day. Now this is pretty meta because this is like a confession of something that was overheard in a phone call. It's literally broken telephone at this point, and Armstrong insisted this conversation with medical staff never happened to begin with. But come October 2012, the anti-doping agency confirmed Armstrong had been using throughout his career. The Tour de France then stripped him of all of his titles. Number 5, Hoover and JFK. This one goes pretty deep. Officials tapping officials. Back in the 60s, there was a file you would probably go to jail for trying to even see for yourself. Just by doing that, they'd be like, yep, you're going, see ya, go wash your eyes. This file was the FBI's official and confidential file. It was kept in the office of J. Edgar Hoover, and inside it was just a plethora of secrets. I'm talking about senators doing sketchy stuff, but one file showed that Hoover was taping phone calls with JFK. Hoover had enough dirt on everybody. That was his whole plan. And what he knew about JFK was that he was having an affair with a 25-year-old named Judith Campbell Exner, who at the time was also seeing mob boss Sam Giancana. So it's like a love triangle of like, wow, we shouldn't be doing this at all. In March 1962, Hoover told Kennedy Kennedy over brunch that the FBI had tapes on him. And of course, this affair. Odd that JFK didn't fire him until his death in 1972. That's a pretty odd thing. That's a loaded threat right there, to be honest. He's like, okay, I see that and I'm not going to touch it. Enjoy your mimosa. I'm not going to do anything about this. Have fun. Just one bill, please. Number 4, Linda Tripp. This next one is a real trip. That's I like throwing puns in. I had to. Back in 1998, Pentagon employee Linda Tripp would have phone calls with Monica Lewinsky, who of course was involved in a scandal with President Clinton. There's some things that happened there. So these conversations were probably pretty juicy, for lack of a better term. Lewinsky even caught on to these recordings at one point while they were happening, and she asked Linda on the other side what this double clicking noise is that she kept hearing. She's like, what's going on? Why is there clicking? Are you chewing gum? Tripp lied to her. She was like, yep, I am chewing gum for sure. That's it. Definitely not me recording something. Meanwhile, Tripp was indeed secretly recording tapes that led to Clinton being impeached. The charges against Tripp for illegally recording were dropped. Snitches get off the hook, apparently. That's wild. Number 3, Ralph Berger. Sometimes you get caught and then the city has your back and then you almost get away with it. It's shady and scary and all lies. But that's how it works, especially if you're Ralph Berger. This attorney was under investigation. He was suspected of bribing public officials, so the police just had to listen in. They're like, oh, we have to know what's going on. They tapped Berger's calls for 2 months. Lo and behold, proof was found. Thing is, Berger had rights, so this was tricky at this point. He argued for the courts to throw out the case by arguing his 4th Amendment rights were exploited. He claimed a mistrial in order to dodge corruption charges, and it worked. New York was on his side at this point, but ultimately the Supreme Court said this was legal and you are for sure a criminal. See you later, alligator. And then New York was like, I guess, yeah, he's bad. That's a good call too, I guess. I don't know. Number 2, Paul Manafort. You never know when the Russian mob may pop up and just start listening about. Former Trump campaign chairman Paul Manafort was under investigation under secret court orders. The FBI obtained a warrant to listen in on Manafort's phone calls back in 2014, and then come 2016, the FBI learned about possible ties between Trump associates and Russian operatives. He was the target of these FBI wiretaps before and after Trump's campaign because under the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, the government can secretly wiretap if you can convince a judge that they're possibly agents of a foreign power. So if you're ever like, I think John's cheating on me, maybe he's an agent of a foreign power, just convince somebody and then you can go through his phone. And finally, number 1, Squidgygate. This one's not so much FBI, but it's pretty juicy. Odds are you haven't heard of it. Let's do it. Lady Diana married Prince Charles on July 29th, 1981. The wedding, of course, was huge. It was televised. It was a flashy whole event. Diana was only 20 at the time. Can you imagine? 20 years old. Wow. The pair had 2 children, Prince William and Prince Harry, but rumors quickly spread about how strong the couple really was behind closed doors. Adultery was rumored on both sides. Finally, come 1996, they divorced. Diana goes on to do great charitable work, but a phone call surfacing from 1992 still has us talking. The call was between Diana and childhood friend James Gilby. During this call, which went down New Year's Eve back in 1989, James called Diana darling and squidgy, those fun little nicknames, even confessing his love for her, in case we didn't catch that with the whole squidgy nickname. Diana told him about how her husband made her feel awful and made her life just miserable, and then 2 ham radio operators just happened to overhear all of it and then record it all. And they sold the tape in 1992. Ken Worf, who was a former bodyguard of Diana, he believes the government communications headquarters played the recordings on loop until radio operators had to catch it. Then they did the deed from there. When we think of Princess Diana, this part of her dark history is often overlooked.
Starting off this countdown, we have James Whitey Bulger. James Joseph Bulger Jr., otherwise known as Whitey, was an American organized crime boss and FBI informant wanted by the FBI. He was the boss of a largely Irish mob in Boston from the 1970s through the 1990s. In the early 2000s, the FBI actually decided to seek help from a crime show in Germany. They had them air photos of James and his girlfriend and told people to look out for them, saying that they were extremely dangerous and armed. Except there was one problem with that. They didn't double check the pictures that they sent in to be aired. Soon, calls were flooding in saying that they spotted this dangerous couple. However, the photos the FBI chose to broadcast were of his parents, harmless retirees. So for the next couple of days, they were doing damage control. How embarrassing. That's one reason why the FBI wants you to forget about this case. In our 9th spot, we have the wire fail. This next story about the FBI is literally gonna make you facepalm. So basically in 2010, Brooks Kellogg was accused of hiring a hitman to try and murder a coworker who sued him for $2.5 million. So the FBI decided to do a sting operation to get Kellogg to confess to his wrongdoings. case. So they sent an undercover agent in with a hidden camera and audio equipment. Only problem is that there was a faulty wire. Now, wouldn't you think that they would double, even triple check to make sure that there were no technical issues before sending him in? But they didn't, so it didn't record audio during the confrontation. As a result, he was almost let off the hook. In our 8th spot today, we have the fantasy tape. In 2008, the FBI was investigating an unsolved murder case when a tape was sent to them. On the tape, it sounded like someone getting tortured. Ultimately, they thought that this tape had to do with the unsolved case that they were working on. Boy, were they wrong, and it's embarrassing. Turns out that the tape actually belonged to a Tennessee judge. His secretary handed it over to the police after she was fired, and it's not of someone being tortured. The judge had made a tape of his sexual fantasies. Apparently, the tape contained, and I quote, graphic, erotic situations intertwined with legal dictation made by now former Judge Hagler. Due to this scandal, the judge did resign. How embarrassing for both the judge and the FBI, who thought that it was a solid lead. In our 7th spot, we have Whitey Bulger Part 2. So like I mentioned, this guy was an organized crime figure that also was an informant for the FBI. And the FBI knew that. In fact, they ignored that side of him if he promised to give them information about the inner workings of an Italian-American crime family. There's just a lot of things that they let slide with this guy that they definitely shouldn't have. Plus, one of the reasons why he was on the run in the first place was because his former FBI handler told him that they were coming for him. So he fled and went into hiding for 16 years. Imagine that. Coming in at number 6, we have Christine Collins. In 1928, a woman named Christine Collins made headlines after her young son, Walter Collins, went missing. At that time, the FBI was dealing with a number of scandals, so they thought, hey, if we find this woman's missing son, that would look so great on us. In the end, they ended up finding her son and returning him to her. Only problem, it wasn't her son. The FBI was like, nonsense, this is your boy, you're just delusional. So they locked her in a psychiatric ward for 10 days. That's when it was revealed that the boy was indeed not her son. Sadly, her son was actually kidnapped and then murdered in a series of murders known as the Wineville Chicken Coop murders. But imagine that, like, you're crazy, lock her up, it is her son. Come on, man. We are now at our 5th and halfway mark with the Beltway Snipers. These were a series of coordinated shootings that occurred over the course of 23 days in October of 2002. 2 snipers randomly shot 13 people. 10 sadly died, while 3 survived but were left in critical condition. One of the victims was FBI intelligence analyst Linda Franklin. Fear quickly spread in the area, and the FBI was facing immense pressure to catch these guys before more people wound up dead. They were finally caught on October 24th of 2002 when the 2 men were found sleeping in their car at 3:15 a.m. 3 weeks to find cold-blooded killers, it seems kind of short, but the FBI was under tons of public pressure and were heavily scrutinized for not catching them sooner. In our 4th spot, we have the corruption. Just a couple of years ago, an ex-FBI special agent, Babak Bromund, was arrested after it was found that he was accepting bribes linked to an Armenian criminal organization. Not only that, but he was falsifying documents to cover up these bribes. He ended up being charged with 3 counts of making false statements to a government agency to cover his bribes, and 1 count of conspiracy to commit bribery of a public official. It was found that a lawyer linked to the criminal organization made regular bribe payments to and purchased gifts for Babak while he was an FBI agent working on national security matters. The lawyer apparently bought him a $36,000 motorcycle and paid him $30,000 for a down payment on a second home in Lake Tahoe. All this among other things. In return, Babak would do things for him like diffuse any law enforcement interests in him, and he would also search the FBI database and find out what dirt they had on him and others. In our 3rd spot, we have Larry Nassar. Back in 2015, news broke that young women, a part of the USA gymnastics team, were being taken advantage of by gym owners, coaches, and staff, one of them being Larry Nassar. Larry is said to have taken advantage of at least 250 young women since 1992, and apparently the FBI severely severely mishandled this case. For example, in July of 2015, the FBI were first notified about the allegations against Larry. It took them until September 2016 until they started to actually investigate him. By then, 70 more athletes were taken advantage of by him. Not only that, but he was caught lying to the FBI on multiple occasions, and they did nothing about that. An attorney for 150 of the women called the FBI out and said, and I quote, "When an ordinary American citizen lies to the FBI in the course of an investigation, they are prosecuted. Yet no charges have been filed against anyone as a result of this 5-year investigation." In our second spot, we have Stoneman Douglas High School. In February of 2018, Nicholas Cruz went into Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland and shot at the students and staff. As a result, 17 people were killed and 17 more were left injured. Well, it turns out that the FBI had received a tip a month prior to the shooting. The tip told the FBI about Cruz's gun ownership, his desire to kill people, his erratic behavior, and even his social media posts, which were disturbing. All the signs of him conducting a school were there, and they handed it to the FBI, and they basically did nothing. The FBI even admitted that they did not follow proper protocol on this tip. Had they might have been able to prevent this from happening. And in our number one spot today, we have Viola Liuzzo. Between 1960 and 1965, an FBI informant, Gary Thomas Rowe, was given the task to infiltrate the Ku Plan. He then was to report to the FBI information on the group members and their activities. But he was told not to participate in attacks or violent situations. But he ignored this. In 1965, a white woman named Viola Liuzzo was murdered by this clan. They had fired shots into her car after noticing her passenger was a young black man. Gary was there when it happened, and he became an accessory to murder. To make matters worse, the FBI spread rumors that the victim, Viola, was a heroin addict, a member of the Communist Party, and that she abandoned her children to have sexual relationships with African Americans involved in the civil rights movement. Meanwhile, she was a civil rights worker that just wanted to help people, and all that stuff was just made up by the FBI. Starting off this countdown, we have the double agent. One of the FBI's biggest concerns is having a double agent a part of their team, and this happened to them multiple times. One time was in 1962. So a KGB agent known as Alexei Kulak walked into the FBI office. Now this was a bold move for him because just 3 blocks away was the Soviet UN mission. An FBI agent asked him if he was worried that they were watching the FBI building, and he replied with, "No, all of your people are out covering a meeting with your guy Dick." And that one sentence started a lengthy investigation. Who was Dick? Clearly, they thought he was a double agent. They spent decades trying to find this spy on their staff. At first, they interviewed anyone named Dick or Richard, while trying to keep everything hush-hush so that the mole wouldn't find out. They went through thousands of agents and spent countless hours trying to find this man. To this day, the FBI is maintaining its silence on this. Moving on to number 9, we have Ricky McCormick. On June 30th, 1999, the body of Ricky McCormick was found in a cornfield in West Alton, Missouri. In his pocket were 2 pages of handwritten notes. The notes were written in a complex cipher. They consisted of a number of random letters and numbers. The FBI believes that, and I quote, "breaking this code could reveal the victim's whereabouts before his death and could lead to the solution of a homicide." However, so far it's been impossible to crack. The FBI does believe that Ricky was murdered, and we still don't know why or by who. In our 8th spot, we have Jerome Ezell. On November 7th, 2017, Jerome Ezell was reported missing in Lansing, Michigan. Later, police found his car, but there were no signs of Jerome. That was until over a month later. On December 12th, 2018, Jerome was found dead in a wooden area. Foul play is suspected. To this day, no one knows what happened to him. The FBI is offering up to $10,000 for information leading to the arrest and conviction of the individual or individuals responsible for the murder of Jerome. In our 7th spot, we have Operation Ghost Stories. Around the early 2000s, the FBI learned that there were multiple sets of Russian spies in the US posing as everyday Americans. That's when Operation Ghost Stories came into play, and this was one of the largest counterintelligence investigations in history. In the end, it led to the arrest of 10 agents by 2010, and this was not an easy thing to do. Nonetheless, learning about potential spies is one thing that the FBI fears. Coming in at number 6, we have the Zodiac Killer. Just last year, it was announced that the infamous serial killer known as the Zodiac Killer was identified. However, the supposed killer, a man named Gary Francis Port, died in 2018. But the FBI clearly knows something that we don't know, because shortly after they shut down the claim that Gary was the Zodiac Killer. The Zodiac Killer is believed to be responsible for at least 5 murders in Northern California from 1968 to 1969. But the killer would write notes and taunt the police and claim to have killed as many as 37 people. This has been a cold case forever. The FBI says that the case is still open and shut down any claims that the killer was identified. We are now at our 5th and halfway mark with Cliven Bundy. This was a huge scandal for the FBI, as they were found to be withholding and destroying key evidence in this case. So basically, in 2014, Bundy and his sons and supporters were involved in an armed standoff with the Bureau of Land Management due to unpaid cattle grazing fees and restrictions. In January of 2018, a federal judge threw out all the criminal charges against Bundy. A part of this was due to the fact that the FBI misplaced or hid a thumb drive with key evidence to this case. It's very messy, and the FBI got in huge trouble for it. In our 4th spot today, we have the Russians. During Trump's presidency, the FBI actually opened a case to look into whether Trump was actually working alongside the Russians or not. And if he wasn't, they knew he was badly compromised. They said that he was compromised for, and I quote, his questionable business dealings, the hush money paid on his behalf to silence women, shady transactions at his charity, and most importantly, his lies about his Russian dealings, including his secret 2015 effort to build a Trump Tower in Moscow, even as he told the world that he had no business with Russia. So Trump's secret ties with Russia and Putin certainly had the FBI concerned. In our 3rd spot today, we have Pizzagate. In March 2016, the personal Gmail account of a former White House chief of staff and chair of Hillary Clinton's 2016 US presidential campaign was hacked, and his emails revealed some pretty disturbing things. They believe that Hillary and other people of power are part of a trafficking ring. In the emails, they use code words like pizza, cheese pizza, and hot dogs. Seems weird. Like, the emails say things like, and I quote, "I'm dreaming about your hot dog stand in Hawaii." Clearly, there's a hidden message there. Another email said Obama spent $65K on pizza and hot dogs. Again, probably another coded message. Whatever was going on, the FBI was concerned, and they were on the case trying to decipher the emails and get down to the bottom of what was really going on. Coming in at number 2, we have Alcatraz. In June of 1962, 3 inmates, John Anglin, his brother Clarence, and Frank Morris, escaped Alcatraz Supermax prison. They put dummy heads that they had made of plaster and flesh-tone paint in their beds to fool the night guards. They then crawled through ventilation ducts between their sinks that they had been widening for quite some time and got out into an unmonitored corridor and then hopped over the cell wall. They then used a raft that they made using over 50 raincoats, among other stolen and donated materials, and they set off into the waters. The prisoners were never caught. For 17 years, the FBI worked on this case, trying to figure out if the escapees survived or if they were on the run. They officially closed the case on December 31st, 1979. And in our number 1 spot today, we have Alonzo Brooks. On April 3rd, 2004, Alonzo Brooks disappeared after attending a house party with his friends. He was supposed to get a ride home with his friends, but one of the friends got lost on a trip to buy cigarettes and never returned back to give Brooks a ride back home. That evening, he never returned home. The following day, his boots and hat were found across the street from the home where the party took place. The local sheriff's department and Kansas State investigators searched the area in the following days, but found nothing. That was until May 1st. Alonzo's family decided to take matters into their own hands and to search the area themselves. and that's when they found Alonzo's body. Rumor has it that his body was being preserved in a freezer while police were out searching for him, and then later dumped there. Several years later, the FBI announced that they were reinvestigating the case, and a new autopsy concluded that Alonzo's cause of death was homicide. So now the hunt is on to find Alonzo's killer or killers. Someone knows who did it, and they're not speaking up.